All right. Welcome to Let's Be Honest with Peter Kozodoy. I am Peter Kozodoy, if you haven't figured that out already, the author of the upcoming Honest to Greatness, How Today's Greatest Leaders Use Brutal Honesty to Achieve Massive Success. Today, I have another greatest leader, Mr. Darren. I'm going to turn it over to him in a moment to give us a backstory. But if you have ever wondered whether honesty matters, whether honesty is the best policy, and how honesty can be weaponized, used as a strategy, not just, the core value you stick on the wall and say, yeah, I'm honest with people, but as an actual weapon to achieve results in your life, then you're in the right place. Darren, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you here.
Peter, it's truly an honor to be here. And I think honesty is such an important topic and focus area here. So I'm excited.
Well, I'm happy to hear you say that. Happy to hear you say that because I've, staked a significant part of my life and net worth on this project. So I hope you're right that honesty does matter and that people do care about it. So Darren, in 3 to 4 minutes, tell everyone out there who you are, what you do, and what gets you fired up.
Yeah. So for me, my name is Darren Virassammy. A couple of things about me. I'm the co-founder of a company called 34 Strong, where we help create great places to work. We're all about focusing on what's right with people to help create employee engagement and cultures where people are valued for being valuable and helping leaders to show up strong in what they're doing. Big part of that for me, Peter, came from the lens of I had to look in the mirror for myself and think of organizations I worked with where I worked under really atrocious leadership where I didn't get to show up that way. And also in the same season under periods where I worked under absolutely incredible leaders and I was highly engaged. And that was for me personally. When I was starting the company with my good friend and business partner, Brandon Miller, we ended up just having this vision of what happens when people go to work and they can show up and be valued for being valuable, seen for their contributions, making that connection. And we can build teams that are well-rounded as teams to move the needle on impact and success that we're having and driving that. But the big overarching piece about that, so what gets me fired up, what are things that get me fired up? In the space of that work, it is the lens of not only improving the workplace experience for people, it's actually what happens, Peter, when people go home, when they're showing up. What happens for the next generation? I'm a father, I'm a husband. What happens for when people get to show up to their children, to their spouses, to their friends, their family, their community, where they can honestly say, I have a chance to be the best version of myself. I have a chance to then come home and not show up with my life taken from me from having survived the day, but I had the opportunity to go through the challenges, thrive, and I can still show up strong in my own world. So those are some of the things on the professional side that have really gotten me out of bed. I'm also an upcoming TEDx speaker. So that got moved out. It was supposed to be 2 weeks ago. With everything going on with the pandemic, that's been pushed out to November now, but we'll even see if that's gonna really stick. Big part of the focus there, Peter, is my focus personally on the power of actually pausing to collaborate with nature and actually just taking the little pauses in the day to go outside 2 minutes, 3 minutes, take a breath of fresh air. We get so locked into our work and grinding and becoming more productive and stepping into all these things. And I had to honestly look at myself at one point and ask myself, is this actually leading me where I actually want to go, or am I just checking boxes personally and not really moving the needle in the direction that I want to get it to? So that's part of my focus in that place. And then the final thing that I'll say in that space, I'm also again father of 2 amazing children, and just a happy husband. Love getting to spend time with my kids and pretty much anything to do with the water. I really enjoy getting out into the lake, paddleboarding, swimming, boogie boarding, scuba diving, all that sort of stuff.
I love that. I love so much about that. And, good luck on your TEDx talk. I did one last year, and it was an eye-opening experience about how to take basically everything you want to say that should probably take 5 hours and boil it down to 17 minutes.
That's right.
it's really difficult. So good luck on that. And I have to echo your sentiment about getting outside in a way. I don't think we're honest with ourselves. You talk about culture and work, about how damaging it can be to sit in like a whitewashed wall space and stare into, a two-dimensional object that's supposed to be in 3D. We need to do a lot more going outside in nature. I moved to the water last year. I always wanted to live on the beach, but it was like, I didn't have to have it. But as soon as I moved there and I got like stepping outside in that salt air and being able to take that 15-minute walk, I cannot believe how therapeutic it ended up being for my well-being. I was shocked, Darren. So I'm with you on that 100%.
It really is. Yeah. It charges you.
Oh, that's the word. It charges you. So as you look back over your career, share with us a time that you had to get brutally honest with yourself. What happened? What was the result? How did you get through that and think through that?
So it's fascinating. It's the birthplace moment for me of my company, 34 Strong. And here's what happened, Peter. And it actually ties into nature, interestingly enough. What was fascinating was when my daughter was 4 months old, we took a trip, just my wife, my daughter and I. This was in December of 2012. We traveled to the big island of Hawaii, and it was the first time that we were taking that time together as just a family. What was so interesting about this experience is it was truly my first opportunity to really be fully present as a dad. That's the crazy part. I used to commute one way about 100 miles. So I'd leave many mornings and my daughter would be sleeping. My wife would still be resting. And then I'd get home in the evenings and we're getting ready to put my daughter down for the evening. So I'm on this trip. And what was so fascinating, Peter, was every morning I'd wake up with my daughter. My wife would sleep in a little bit and take my daughter down to the ocean. And we'd take a walk along the beach. I mean, obviously she wasn't walking. She was 4 months old, right? So she was in her little Bjorn. I put her feet in the water. And she would just be taking in the sunrise, the surfers jumping into the water to catch the waves, the sound of the palm trees rustling, and the breeze that you were talking about hitting them. So one of those mornings, I went up and we were seated on the lanai on the balcony overlooking the mighty Pacific Ocean that was just roaring. And I'm having a cup of coffee, eating a papaya, and all of a sudden, what happens is she looks up at me, and my wife's seated next to me. My little daughter, Kira, does the most amazing thing, Peter. She laughs out loud for the first time. I'm absolutely floored. I think this is the coolest thing. Now, here's the thing. In that moment, here's where brutal honesty hit me. It was the most amazing and terrifying moment of my life, simultaneously up until that point. So it was amazing because here I am looking at this 4-month-old, just little ball of energy and potential. Right? That's all she was. My mind was running in one direction towards she's going to talk, she's going to walk, she's going to run, she's going to swim. All these things that she would do in her life. And what would her life look like as she tapped into her potential? At the same time, my mind was running in the other direction, asking the question, Darren, what happened to your potential? What happened to your potential? You're living this false life, working in a job that you don't love. You're disengaged. You're surviving the day. You're collecting a nice paycheck, but you have a song in you that you'd like to sing. You have music in you that you'd still like to play, and that you know that you can actually create a greater impact than this. So it was a huge eye-opening experience that made me look deep in the mirror. And I knew in that moment, Peter, that something had to change. As fate would have it, I came back from that trip making that change. And within a couple weeks of that, I was teaching at a college here in the Sacramento area of California where I live. They had an opportunity for me to take on more classes. And the job that I was commuting to, I was a senior project manager for a commercial construction company building retail projects all across the United States. I came back from that and I was able to cut a deal, stay on board with the construction company, but in a part-time capacity. I didn't want to leave them high and dry. Being honest with myself, that is just no way to leave a place, even if you don't love it. So I wasn't going to do that to them. but I cut a deal to stay on board, help find my replacement, help train him, who was somebody that was already in the company that I worked really closely with, to set him up for success, and go down the path of trying to figure out what I wanted to do next while I was teaching more. And within 2 months of that, because my mind had changed and I got honest with myself, Peter, my business partner was introduced to me by a common friend of ours that we were in a mastermind group in together. And we connected, we sat down, we had a cup of coffee. We realized we had this shared vision of what work could be like and the impact that we could have on lives for generations to come as we were able to shift workplace culture one organization at a time. And that was it. It was born in honesty.
I love everything about that. It's extremely similar to why I ended up being a book author. It's because, my tragic honesty moment was turning 30. And I realized that I had had a couple big failures as a teenager that they had fueled my entrepreneurship. They'd been chips on my shoulder for being an entrepreneur and growing a company, except that it turns out, had been holding me back from, I had sort of assumed a second best scenario. It's like, well, I hadn't achieved that number one thing, so I was never going to achieve a number one thing, so I may as well just be sort of second best me. And after I turned 30, I got honest about all the things that the potential, I love that word, that I had missed, that I wasn't capitalizing on. And being an author, writing a book was one of those things. And it came out of that moment of honesty. It's so important. It's one of the things that I say over and over again on all of these podcasts and live streams, to help people understand that if they're not honest with themselves about what they want, there's no way in hell they can ever achieve it. It has to start with honesty. So Darren, tell us about, and you may have already crossed a couple of these, what was your biggest win looking back? Could be personal, family, business. And what was your biggest loss or regret?
Yeah, so I think my biggest win was setting myself free from following the scripted life, checking the boxes. Some of them were just society-based. Some of them were, you're doing the right things, right? It did lead to a good life. When you're looking from the outside in, it looked like, okay, you're doing all the right things. You've gone to school. You've got an advanced degree. You're climbing the corporate ladder, right? And as we go through that process, and as I was going through that, I was just looking at that single rung that was in front of me, but hadn't been paying attention to where that ladder was actually leaned up against. So I think a place that I had been living, Peter, and I think a place that in our work that we've found that many live, is we have these if-then statements. If I do this and I check this box, then I will be successful. If I'm successful, then I will be happy. And that is the complete opposite way and wrong way for us to look at it.
That's not true. None of that's true.
Exactly. And if we start with happiness, success, that is success. Because there's a lot of people that check all the boxes and looking out in, they look like they're success, and there's nothing happy about where they're at.
Yep.
I wasn't there, but I was on the path to unhappiness. I was on the path to be disengaged from my family, from my life, from the impact that I could have personally. And it's not about me. It's actually about the impact that others were having, that I could empower in others. It has nothing to do with me. It was about actually serving others in a much bigger way than I could in any of the places that I was. And as that starts to kind of go through and we condition that space, that's the direction that we can go down. That's the path we can go down. And it's not helpful for ourselves and for others. So that was one of the biggest wins, I feel like, on a professional level, because I'd never thought of myself in my 20s as I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to I'm going to go through what it takes to grow a business and grow. And that was also, now that I look at it, I can say that one of the big regrets was that I didn't have that revelation sooner. So I couldn't have forced it to happen any sooner. But that is one of the regrets, because knowing where it is now and the way that I've shifted, I just wonder what life would have been like if I would have been able to have stepped into that place in my 20s. Really make that time. I was talking about nature. One of the big takeaways that came from that experience with my daughter That moment wouldn't have happened, Peter, where I took all of that in, if I hadn't been rooted in nature for the days before. She had done plenty of other amazing things. There was all kinds of other warning signs and wake-up calls that had happened in my life up to that point that were telling me, you need to change. I didn't listen to them. So I'm happy that I finally listened when Kira laughed out loud for the first time. I'm regretful that I didn't pay attention to those signs beforehand, but very happy that I finally did make the shift.
And my takeaway there, Darren, is like, you don't need to boil the ocean. You set one intention, which was to spend more time in nature. That was like mountain number one. And once you get to the top of mountain number one, you see more mountains, right? And so it's like that empowers the next journey and the next journey. And that, very similar for me. In fact, I literally just before we got on was writing an email to go out during launch week next week, talking about, hey, when you take a step forward, you don't know what new spider webs that step forward sets out. And all we need to do is concentrate on what's the next step right now. And it can be just setting an intention. I'm going to spend more time in nature. It's very simple, right? I'm going to sit down and think about what the title of my book might be. That's the activity today. I don't have to do everything else, right? I don't have to write a bestseller. It's okay. One step at a time. Darren, how can people find you and your work and get involved and follow you?
Yeah, so great place to find me is at 34strong.com. You can find out a lot about what we are doing there. You can also take a look at our podcast, which literally launched today. It's called Leading Strong. We have a whole series that's going on, and it's really giving the tools to people, very, very practical applied tools. They're roughly 20 to 30 minute long shows, but digging into what we call our manager intelligence skills that the best managers have to lead strong in times when times are great and through massive uncertainty. Simple tactics, questions that people can get into on moving the needle on engaging their employees. So that's a big place that people can go to find out more about me. You can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, all those sorts of elements as well. So
I can't wait to see what you have to say about my management chapter then with regards to how to manage with honesty, because I've worked with startups to the Fortune 500, and I can tell you that some of the management practices going on are not sustainable. They're so damaging. And I hope that more companies learn about your company and the work you do, because we need to be a lot more honest about how people work, what makes people fulfilled at work, what the new version of work in the 21st century even looks like. So Darren, thanks so much for being on.
Peter, thank you so much for having me. It's truly been an honor, and thank you for making honesty such an important part of how we're looking forward. It's critical right now.
Someone needs to take on the Sisyphean challenge, right? Push the boulder up the hill. Listen, if strategic honesty is interesting to you, please go pick up a copy of Honest to Greatness. As I have said to my wife recently, what happens if nobody buys this book? Then I have to admit that nobody gives a crap about honesty. And I really hope that doesn't happen. So make sure you go out, buy a copy. I could use all the support I can get. Thanks, everyone. I'm Peter Kozodoy, and thanks for being honest.